and what it means to be her companion. In the sense that we find there were people in Medina who tried to help Sayyidah Fatima. But today we don't remember them as the companions of Sayyidah Fatima. Whereas in later times there were certain individuals who arguably never even met Sayyidah Fatima. But today we refer to them as those who are with Fatima. Prime example is in Ziyarat Waritha. May Allah allow all of us to go to Karbala year upon year. When you go to Imam Hussein's shrine, you recite the ziyarah of Imam Hussein, ziyarah of Hazrat Habib, Hazrat Al-Akbar. There's the ziyarah of the shuhada that were with Imam Hussein. And there's a phrase in that we recite. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Amir al-Mu'mineen. The next line is what? Assalamu alaikum ya ansara Fatima al-Zahra. Now scholars here say that the likes of Zuhair bin Gain, likes of Habib arguably, Muslim ibn Awsaja, Junada, Wahab, Abdullah al-Kalbi, they were not present in Medina when Sayyidah Fatima was being attacked. So why are they referred to as the companions of Sayyidah Fatima? Because on one side we have the likes of Zubair ibn al-Awwam, who was in fact the cousin of Amir al-Mu'mineen. From his father's side, he was the nephew of Bibi Khadija. From his mother's side, he's the cousin of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was actually there, according to narrations, he was in the house of Bibi Fatima when the attack happened. And perhaps like what most of us would have done, he took out his sword and came out to fight. So when they burned the door down and they entered, he was the one who came outside to fight. And they ended up wrestling him and taking his sword away and breaking it. But today you don't refer to Zubair as Ansar of Fatima. Just a brief analysis here. So we find, first and foremost, that Ahlul Bayt alayhim Islam had a Hakiki version and a Hukuki version. Hakiki in the sense that they are the Imam of the time, they are in front of you. And to an arguable extent, their Hakiki version finishes when they leave this world, this temporal world, physically speaking. But their Hukuki rights, their legal rights, stay until Judgment Day. For example, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, when we say Imam al-Zamana is going to take revenge for Imam Hussein. Where's Yazid today? Where's Shimr ibn Sinan, Umar ibn Sa'd? Imam Mahdi is meant to take revenge. No, Imam Hussein's legal rights are still here today. What he stood for, the revival of Islam, and all the other themes, wherever they are being trampled upon, that's like the trampling upon the rights of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So we find with Sayyidah Fatima, similarly, we have the likes of Zubair as a case study, and the likes of Zuhair bin Gain. With Zubair, we find, as we just mentioned, he was the cousin of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was someone who came out to actually fight and was wrestled to the ground. But what changed with Zubair, and what changed with the likes of Zuhair or Habib ibn Mazahir? With Zubair, we find he had muhabba of Ahlul Bayt, not mawadda. A few days ago, may Allah bless Maulana Absar Naqvi, he mentioned this analysis in one of his lectures. He said what? The Quranic ayat is, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Kulla as'alukum alayhi ajran illa, not muhabba, mawadda. What's the difference between muhabba and mawadda? Muhabba, in easy terms, is the love someone shows for something. For example, even in the animal kingdom, you find a lion cares for her cubs. Animals like the monkeys, giraffes, whatever animal there is, it cares for its babies, its children, its provisions. Similarly, with humans, we also have this term, muhabba. Mawadda is a step forward, where your actions, not only your love, but your actions coincide with what that individual stands for. So we find, for example, in Karbala, normally a mother does what? She nurtures for her child. She gives everything she has for her child. In Karbala, those same mothers are doing what? Why are you still alive? Go fight for Hussein. Why has your body not come back yet? That's a higher level of love, which we call mawadda. The likes of Zubair al-Awwam had muhabba. But when the going went tough, when he was tested based on his nafs, he did not have mawadda of the Ahlul Bayt. He only had muhabba. As we find in the time of the Battle of Jamal, he did what? He joined the likes of Talha and the instigators of the Battle of Jamal. and he fought against Imam Ali. Okay, not physically speaking, he left just when the battle was about to begin. He was there in the preparation and the acts and everything involved in the beginning of the battle. So we find Zubair is on one side. He was motivated or instigated by his worldly desires. On the other side, you have the likes of Zuhair bin Gain. Zuhair, who avoided Imam Hussein, but he had that mawadda within him. All it needed was a kindling, a spark, and that's what the Imam provided him. As the narration mentions, after the Hajj, he was avoiding the tents of Imam Hussein until one day Imam Hussein said to him, "Have a meeting with me." And he spoke to him, and he reminded him of the prophetic traditions. And it is said Zuhair became such a person of full love and attention and desire to Imam Hussein. He went back to his tent and said to his wife, "I am free to divorce you if you wish. If you want to go back now, back to Medina, you are free to go back." Time going with Hussein to Karbala. The night of Ashura, the likes of Zuhair, who we just mentioned, was avoiding Imam Hussein originally, had so much mawadda. He's saying, "Oh Abu Abdullah, how can I leave you alone? I would rather you cut me into 1,000 pieces, burn those pieces, scatter the ashes into the air, and repeat this 1,000 times, and I would still never leave you." We have the likes of Habib ibn Mazahir, who's sitting in Kufa. The Imam writes a letter to him, inviting him towards that heavenly mission, which was in Karbala. So we find similarly with Sayyidah Fatima, salamullahi alayha, even though we might not be in her time, we can have mawadda for her. We can be part of her companions by serving the Imam of our time. Now you might ask, what's the mawadda in our time? What's our sacrifice? Oh, in Karbala, it was your physical life. Sacrifice what you have. Today, in the time of Imam Zamana, your mawadda could be your social media. Your mawadda could be your time, offering it in the way of Allah. For example, offering your services to the local masajid, cleaning if anything. If anything, not that, coming to the local madrasa, coming for Salatul Jama'ah, Salatul Jummah. That is based on circumstances. It's something subjective. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at your heart. So everything that you do, if you do it with that pure intention for Imam al-Zamana, then indeed you will also be counted as one of the companions of whom? Sayyidah Fatima. Just like the companions of Imam Hussein fought for Hussein, but they're referred to in this ziyarah as the Ansar of Fatima al-Zahra. Now we find even this ziyarah is written by whom? The likes of Imam Jafar Sadiq. And he says what? That heartbreaking line, "Bi-abi antum wa ummi." Referring a Ma'soom Imam says, "May my father, Imam Baqir, who's also Ma'soom, and my mother be sacrificed for you, O companions of Imam Hussein." What a makam to have, just by having that mawadda. And so as we finish off, we remember, guidance is not a full stop. At any moment, God forbid, our foot could slip. Which is why we read the du'as that we read in our kunut and our salat. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. Oh Allah, do not misguide our hearts after you have guided us. Don't let our temptations get in the way. Don't let our envy, our personal desires corrupt our souls and our mission. And further, we recite the dua, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Muqallibal Qulub, Thabbit Qalbi ala Dinik. Wa waliyik. Make our hearts steadfast upon your deen, yes, but also on your wali al-amr, the Imam of the time. I finish with this one short example of the importance of sincerity and what it can do for you. There's a sheikh who said, I was going on an international flight for a maths conference. On my way there, I met another professor on the same flight. He said to me, Samat al-Sheikh, what are you doing here today? He said, I'm going for the maths conference. He said, you and a maths conference, you're a sheikh. This doesn't add up. The sheikh said, I looked at him and said, you know a hexagon. How many quadratic formulas can you make of a hexagon? He said, I could do 5, 6 maybe. He said, what if I said to you 15? This guy here is a professor. He said, 15, maybe an expert can do that. Yes, it's possible. He said, what about 40, 50? Now at this point, the professor began staring at him. And he stopped replying. He thought he was taking the mick, he was making fun out of him. The sheikh continued, what about 400 quadratic formulas for the hexagon? 500, 1,000. The professor could say nothing. The sheikh replied, there's an alim who lived roughly 1,000 years ago by the name of Khwaja Nasir al-Din al-Tusi. He wrote over 197,000 quadratic equations for the hexagon alone. Someday you have time, come to the seminary. I will teach you there. So we find that your appearance is not just anything. When you have that pure intention, that pure niyyah, it will open the cosmos for you. And this same Shaykh, when he's dying, and they asked him, what should we put on your grave? Muhakkik, Hazrat, Ayatollah, what would you like? He's buried in the haram of Imam Al-Kadhim. He replied, just put the ayah of Surah Kahf, وَقَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَائِهِ بِالْوَسِيدِ. The dog of these Aimma is laying in front of them. That's the importance of sincerity. And so as we finish today, we remember the likes of Sayyidah Fatima and what she went through. And we remember 2 Muslim janazas. Indeed, Lady Fatima's janazah cries for this second janazah. What do we mean here? Sayyidah Fatima, for whom Rasulullah said, Fatima badatun minni, she is a part of me. There's another janazah for whom Rasulullah said, Husaynu minni wa ana min al-Husayn. Sayyidah Fatima, Amir al-Mu'mineen is burying her. Ali ibn Abi Talib for Hussein in Karbala. There was also an Ali by the name of Ali as-Sajjad. But the difference is this. When Imam Ali is burying Sayyidah Fatima, he's crying, Ya Rasulullah, this is not the same Fatima you left with me. The Fatima you left with me did not have a broken arm. She did not have bruises upon her face. Oh Rasulullah, you ask her what she went through after you and see what she tells you. But in Karbala, as the writer writes, Imam Sajjad is also burying Hussein. And he's saying to Rasulullah, oh Rasulullah, this is not the same Hussein you left in Medina. The Hussein you left in Medina did not have a finger missing. His wrists were not cut apart. Oh Rasulullah, this is only what I could find of the body of Hussein. Why? Because the horses of Banu Umayyah trampled his holy body. Oh Rasulullah, there's one more thing. The neck you would kiss is being paraded in the bazaars of Kufa and Sham. I will bring the head back, oh Rasulullah. This is not the same Fatima. This is not the same Hussein. This is not the same Fatima. This is not the same Hussein. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa sayalamu allazina zalamu ayyamun kalibiyan kalibun. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the high makam of Sayyidah Fatima, by her position in the eyes of Allah, to forgive us our sins, to accept our humble offering, to allow us to be with Sayyidah Fatima in this world and the hereafter, and to allow our eyes to see the rebuilding of Jannat al-Baqi. For the love of Sayyidah Fatima, if you can recite aloud, salawat.
Jazakallah. Salawat Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. My respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you are well aware, Sakina Trust construction work is still ongoing and we are in need of your generous support. Please join in the FATIMIYAH appeal by generously donating. You can scan the QR codes around the mosque and donate through PayPal or set up a bank transfer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the name of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra accept your contributions. Salawat Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Tonight we are very fortunate to have a question and answer session after the majlis. If you would like to ask a question, please write it down and give it to one of the volunteers. I would like to now invite Maulana Jafar Najm to the stage with a very loud salawat. Salawat Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وطبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم من يوم عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. وأما بعد فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فاطمة بضعة مني فمن آذاها فقد أذاني. really just it's an absolute pleasure and great honor for Sakina to us, and especially for East Londoners. This is, I think, first time ever Syed Mahdi Al-Modarresi is here. Alhamdulillah. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first for giving us this grace and tawfiq. And as the riwayah and tradition is, Man lam yashkuril makhluk, lam yashkuril khalik. So I really just would like to thank all donors, all, mashallah, your support. You came all the way from long distance, and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, you benefited from the lecture of Samahat Syed Al-Mahdi Modarresi. And I think, inshallah, that this is the beginning. And future again, we will have these opportunities to invite Samahat Syed Mahdi Al-Modarresi to either in Muharram or in even Ramadan, or at least in Fatimiyah days. He's not here, but I have already requested him to, inshallah, put Sakina's name in the list. So he, at least whenever he has the time, so we are ready and we will invite him to, inshallah, and we welcome him at Sakina's. Again, I take this opportunity again to thank all of you mu'mineen and mu'minat, as it has been mentioned by my brother Asad. Almost we have covered all of our work, but still 20% is still remaining. I really just urge you to support Sakinatas, as you already, alhamdulillah, mashallah, mashallah, all of you, mashallah, you have supported. I ask you and request you to support Sakinatas, and you can support. We have a lot of, mashallah, here we have mainly entrance, bathroom, ladies' bathroom remaining, and gents' bathroom. Again, we need to make for Salatul Janazah, another room for Salatul Janazah, proper room outside. And finally, some remaining work in the basement. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just let me repeat this part, and I need to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thank Samah Syed Mahdi Al-Modarresi for his great and auspicious time he spent, and he, mashallah, all the way he came. And we, alhamdulillah, I told him today at the dinner time, lunch time, that now some people, they consider this part of London in London now, because they said, no, we are not, you are outside of London. I said, no, we are in London, but you don't consider this area or this part as a London. Alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah, thank you, Samah Syed, and I really appreciate your efforts. And I always mentioned here, this would be the inshallah the beginning, and inshallah in future you will, inshallah, I hope, inshallah, put our name or in your list. So inshallah we will benefit, inshallah, from your lectures and from your inshallah great inshallah efforts. Thank you so much. May Allah bless you all. Jazakumullah ta'ala khair al-jaza. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوات محمد وآل محمد. I mentioned this earlier, but we are going to have a Q&A session after the majlis, just after the matam. So if you've got any questions, please do write them down. Dr. Saab is at the back. You could get a piece of paper off him and write it down. And inshallah, we will ask Syed those questions. Now I'd like to invite to the stage with a very loud salawat, Syed Mahdi Al-Modarresi. Salawat Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته وعونه ودعاءه وخيره ورضاه ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك يا كريم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. Our religion is made up of many different dimensions and components. The famous prophetic hadith states, إِنَّ هَذَا الدِّينَ مَتِينٌ فَأَوْغِلُوهُ بِرِفْقٍ. This is a dense religion. It is a way of life. It's a cliche, but it's true. It covers every facet of the needs of human beings as well as other sentient beings. It covers, for instance, spirituality, meaning the relationship between us and our Creator. Part of it has to do with the inner dimensions, what we refer to as ma'rifatun nafs. Who am I? My weaknesses, my vulnerabilities, my shortcomings, what ticks me off, what provokes me, what triggers me, and all of the spiritual diseases and how to cure them. Part of it has to do with our relationship with each other. How do we engage with other fellow human beings? Part of it has to do with how we treat the environment around us. Part of it has to do with jurisprudence. The legal component of our faith defines the outer limits, the borders, the red lines that we're not supposed to cross. Part of it has to do with matters of worship, which are things that are debated and discussed in jurisprudence classes, what we refer to as al-ibadat, al-muamalat. And so it covers a great deal of topics. Hence the idea, which I touched upon last night, that religion is a very complex and elaborate system that requires expertise if the individual is going to be in a position of teaching or preaching or debating. So I talked a little bit about this last night. I don't want to get into it again, but this goes to highlight the fact that the complexity we find in this ecosystem is truly staggering. Some of our maraji' have stated that to become a mujtahid, which let's not forget, ijtihad has to do primarily with jurisprudence and legal theory. Ijtihad does not include Quranic exegesis and commentary. Ijtihad does not necessarily entail learning the sciences of hadith. Ijtihad is focused on one dimension of this religion, which is matters of jurisprudence and legal theory, what we call usulul fiqh. Some of our maraji' have stated that this expertise in this specific subject is the equivalent of 6 or 7 PhDs, which once again goes to emphasize the fact that this is a matter that requires expertise. Not everyone can become self-taught. You would never take medical advice from a person who has studied a bunch of medical textbooks. You would never take even building advice, things that have to do with plumbing. You often get an expert to do the job. And yet, sadly, tragically, when it comes to religion, everyone feels that they're entitled to an opinion. Everyone should be able to express that opinion because somehow we've democratized religion. We've allowed religion to be at the disposal of every single individual, with or without nefarious objectives. The end goal for many might be sincere, but the process is one that is deeply flawed. Even if I have sincere intentions when giving medical advice to someone who's suffering from cardiac arrest, for instance, and I feel that the best way to help someone, to provide them with first aid, is to perhaps waterboard them or something else. Even if I have the best of intentions, at best, this would be the case of an individual who's not only ignorant, but ignorant of his ignorance. So the intentions are irrelevant. But this is a subject that we talked about and I feel is very important and relevant in this day and age, but we'll leave further discussions and examples for another time. The point I'm trying to make here is that religion covers many, many facets. However, the most important dimension in religion is the foundation on which everything else rests. This anchor that keeps the boat in place. The foundation of religion is matters of creed. It is the beliefs and values on which we build everything else. Why is this the single most important dimension in religion? Because without it, the whole structure comes crumbling down. Imagine, and I've used this example in the past, imagine you speak to your friend who happens to be a realtor and say to him that I am looking for a building to purchase as my primary residence, for instance. And he offers you some of the options available. One option is a building that has the best aesthetics. It looks pleasing. It appears beautiful. The doors, the walls, the windows, the facilities, the air conditioning, the parking garage, operates remotely, all these things. But there is a problem, an underlying issue with the foundation of this building. Any honest realtor will tell you that as good as this building looks, the aesthetics are irrelevant because you would be literally risking your life by living in this building. Because when the foundation is weak, when it was based on flawed metrics and calculations, any earthquake, any structural damage might lead to the building collapsing. So no sane individual would go ahead and purchase this building for their personal use, no matter how discounted the price might be, because that is the kind of building that you can't quite fix. You can't reverse engineer the process and fix the foundation now that everything's been built upon it. Now, imagine conversely that you're offered another building, and this building is not exactly aesthetically pleasing. Maybe the doors are missing. They haven't had time to place them. Maybe the windows aren't there. Maybe the walls don't have a good paint job. All these things act to the detriment of the selling potential of the building, right? But if the building has a sound and solid foundation, then any realtor will tell you that, look, there is potential here. It's a fixer-upper, as they call them in America. I don't know what you call them here. This building is a fixer-upper. It's a great opportunity, in fact, for you to take this and try and renovate it and fix it in a manner that suits your needs, because it's got a solid foundation. The structure is very strong. In the case of religion, the reason I mention this example is because if the foundation is strong, if the beliefs are predicated on strong metrics, then even if the structure is suffering aesthetically, even if there are flaws, even if the windows and doors are missing, it's a fixer-upper. You can still, there is potential there. You can still actually build it in such a manner where it becomes much more useful than the other option. Another example that you might cite is when you have an old clunker, an old car that has a lot of issues. It makes strange noises, and the window doesn't roll down, and the speedometer doesn't show accurate numbers, and all these issues might be there. But if you happen to be on the right road, then ultimately you'll get to your destination, perhaps with difficulty. Perhaps you'll experience lots of bumps and issues, sure, but you're on the right road. Whereas you could have a hypercar, the most expensive vehicle that looks beautiful and is comfortable and checks all the boxes and runs faster than any other vehicle on the road, any other production vehicle. But if you happen to be on the wrong road, then you'll never reach your destination. All of these examples and illustrations are designed to highlight the fact that beliefs are the bedrock of our faith, the bedrock of our religion. Which is why when someone with nefarious objectives wishes to attack and undermine our faith, they don't attack those peripheral matters. They don't attack those other areas that, as important as they are, do not represent parts of the foundation. Instead, they focus all their attacks on the foundation, on the beliefs. That's why you're seeing beliefs being subjected to attacks from every direction. That's why you see people not attacking how we do wudu. Again, as important as that is. Because if wudu isn't done right, then your salat is invalid. And if your salat is invalid, a whole host of other things happen. It's a chain reaction. Of course, wudu is important. Of course, fiqh is important. Of course, all these other issues have to be looked into and taken seriously. But they won't attack something that appears on the fringes of this solid structure. Rather, they will go for the jugular, as they say. They will attack the foundations. They will make you question and develop doubts in your beliefs. That's why you see demonic voices rise around the time of Fatimiyah. That's why you hear people trying to undermine the position of Fatima al-Zahra, and we talked about what she did in the previous nights and how critical her role was in the preservation of this faith. Without Fatima, we would all have been fed that false narrative, that fake facade, that lie. We would have fallen victim to it, as many people have. But the truth would have been obliterated from the face of existence. The truth would have been non-existent. Right now, the truth is out there. If you search and you investigate and you're sincere, you'll find the truth sooner or later. A good friend who's a recent revert, who embraced the religion of the Ahlul Bayt, was telling me just the other day when I was in the company of wonderful brothers and sisters in Bradford. He said to me, Syed, you know what made me convert and become a Shia? It was Fadak. It was Fatima al-Zahra. And believe it or not, he said to me, when I first heard about the dispute, the claims that were made by Fatima al-Zahra against the oppressive rulers of the day, he said, when I first became aware of all of this, believe it or not, I set out to find flaws in Fatima's arguments. He said, I actually couldn't digest the idea that the leader of this movement, someone who is adored and even worshipped by so many people, could in fact be a usurper, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a hypocrite, a liar. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And so my intention was to minimize the claims of Fatima, trivialize the attack, the ambush, and the aftermath, and to try and present the case of the opposing side, the Khilafah system, as the true, authentic Islam. In other words, he was about to fall for the lie. As I said last night, that they tried extremely hard in order to pretend and to convince the masses that there was consensus after the Prophet's demise. That after the Prophet departed this world, there was nothing but roses and butterflies and unicorns, lush green fields, Muslims getting together peacefully and lovingly, engaging in intellectual debates and deliberations, eventually choosing the most qualified person amongst them, the most experienced. This lie was shattered by Fatima. And so he said that when I first encountered this, I actually was trying to defend the Khilafah. But soon enough, because I was sincere, because I was genuinely trying to find the truth, I could not swallow that red pill. I couldn't get myself to accept the narrative that they have presented because there are too many holes in it. There are way too many flaws, way too many systemic problems. And we talked about these in the previous nights. The point I'm trying to make is that they left no stone unturned. They tried everything. Think about this for a moment. The plan was so well orchestrated, planned, and eventually executed that almost no part of it was left unaccounted for. For instance, they resorted to thuggery, sheer extreme violence. Remember? Managing savagery? They brought in an entire tribe from outside Medina, known to be killers for hire. These were mercenaries named Bani Aslam. These people were not from Medina, meaning that they were nomads, they were barbarics in a sense. They didn't have much interaction with the Holy Prophet or his family. As far as they were concerned, it was a contract. They were being paid a fee in order to carry out a job. They were tasked with intimidating the entire city of Medina and all of its inhabitants so that no one would dare break their silence and destroy the consensus. Number one. Number two, they were in fact the main forces in the ambush against the house of Fatima al-Zahra. No sense of regard for Fatima, not a trace of mercy in their hearts. We've all heard about those who killed Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura and what they were like. These are people who resembled the killers of Abu Abdullah, Bani Aslam. So, intimidation, thuggery, violence. We talked about how they killed Malik ibn Nuwayra, as well as many of his tribesmen. They used rape as a weapon of war. All these grieving mothers and wives and daughters were raped in the immediate aftermath of the loss of their husbands. Their hands were amputated. I mean, it is the most grotesque image you can present about any society. This is the savagery of the Jahiliyyah taken to the next level, taken to its inevitable conclusion. That was part of it. The other part was incentivizing those who could be incentivized. Financial offerings. Pay off those who might be so inclined. And so lots of payments were made, lots of envelopes and money bags were distributed. The intimidation also took other forms. Let me give you a very critical example. In Sahih Bukhari, there is a report that says that the wives of the Prophet, those who didn't really get involved in the, if you like, the political dimension, those who were simply busy living their own lives, after the death of the Holy Prophet and once things were established for the self-proclaimed Khalifa, the wives of the Prophet chose the third Khalifa, obviously, to be, and they asked him to be a messenger to the first Khalifa. They were, after all, part of the same group. And so given that relationship, these other wives asked him to go and ask the first Khalifa for their share of inheritance. He went and spoke to the first Khalifa. Who responded to them? It was the daughter of the first Khalifa. Again, this is all in Sahih Bukhari. She said to them, listen carefully. أَمَا تَتَّقِينَ اللَّهِ. Have you no piety? Now, who's saying this? Aisha says this to the other wives of Rasulullah. What exactly is she saying? Do you have no piety? The suggestion here is that, don't you remember? She in fact spells this out. She says, don't you remember the Prophet said, "Inna ma'ashara al-anbiya la nuwarrith ma taraknahu sadaqa," that we the prophets do not leave an inheritance. Whatever we leave is considered charity and distributed amongst all the Muslims. Didn't you hear the Prophet say that? Now, obviously, in response, some of those wives might have said, oh, yeah, sure. Maybe I was in the kitchen when the Prophet said that. Maybe I was taking a nap, but yeah, of course, whatever you say. Why? Because number one, this is the daughter of the Khalifa we're talking about. A person who has an armed group of thugs roaming the streets of Medina and who would stop at nothing to ensure that consensus is maintained. And so they fear for their lives. Also, they're being accused of not having piety. What does that mean? It means that you are trying to claim something that is not yours to begin with, right? Imagine that you heard from a reliable source that I took yours truly, this insignificant sinful servant, has taken public funds from the Muslim treasury for his own benefit unrightfully. Would you even listen to a word I say? Well, maybe. There's really no guarantee out there these days. People listen to all kinds of people, unfortunately. They kind of compartmentalize, don't they? Oh, yeah, I know he's got those issues, but it's okay. It's fun. It's entertaining, unfortunately. Sign of the times. But you shouldn't listen to anything I have to say, because my reputation is irreparably damaged, isn't it? Because it makes me a thief. And a thief isn't qualified, or a sinner of any kind isn't qualified to preach to others. Right? Now, Aisha is telling the wives of the Prophet that you are not being pious, meaning you are a bunch of lying, conniving sinners. You know the Prophet said that, but you're pretending like he didn't. And now you're coming to ask for something that doesn't belong to you. You filthy liars. Although not with as many words, but that's the suggestion. The wives that have to be respected, the wives that are the most noble people in society, Ummahatul Mu'mineen, all of a sudden they're being accused of being thieves by another wife. But that's okay, because it's the wife who's leveling that accusation. Had Salama said something like that, she would be dealing with a whole other beast. Because Salama paid a price for her defense of Fatima al-Zahra. Do you know what that was? Remember, Salama and the other wives of the Prophet, they're not allowed to remarry. So they don't have a guardian. They don't have another husband to look after them in those times. They have no income stream. All they have is the monthly stipend that every other Muslim is entitled to. Salama, because of her defense of Fatima al-Zahra, was deprived of that stipend for a year. Had it been someone else, there would have been a completely different treatment. No. This one's special. She gets to stay and do whatever she wants. She could lead an army to battle and lead to the death and destruction of 30,000 souls if she wants. Perfectly fine. Compartmentalize. She repented, I'm sure. Okay. My point here is this. When the wives of the Prophet are being accused of being impious thieves, or still back away. When the tribe of Malik ibn Numayra is slaughtered, of course the other tribes will back away. Why? Because they're slaughtered with the accusation of being murtaddeen. They're killed because they're apostates. Can you imagine how outrageous this was? To the extent that the future second Khalifa came and objected to the first as to why he ordered the killing of the tribe of Malik ibn Nuwayra. I mean, imagine that. To the extent that this person would defend that tribe. And he said to Abu Bakr, he said, these people, some of them, when they were taken captive and killed, they were praying. How could you kill them? How could you accuse them of being murtaddeen? Hurub al-ridda is what they're called to this day. Even though Sunni scholars and theologians have had a really difficult time reconciling with the fact that just because someone doesn't pray doesn't mean that you execute them. That if someone steals, you don't put them in front of a firing squad, do you? This is a Kharijite mentality. That if someone commits a sin, they have to be killed. Sunni theologians can't grapple with the fact that these were Muslim men and women, and yet they were slaughtered, they were murdered. The adhan would echo from their minarets, as I said. But it was about intimidating them. It was about sending a message. It was about managed savagery, so that others would take notice and no one would dare question the fake purported consensus. And so, when it came to Fatima al-Zahra, they left no stone unturned. In their mind, they were thinking, we need to squeeze Fatima and encircle her from every direction. We need to put as much pressure as we can and keep on intensifying the pressure so that she backs away like everybody else, so that she also goes quiet. Surely Fatima wouldn't jeopardize her life. Surely Fatima must be like one of those other wives. You're being impious, you better watch out. And so they'll back away. Maybe Fatima will do the same thing. Fatima has young children, بِأَبِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ. She has an 8-year-old, she has a 5-year-old, she has a daughter. Surely Fatima wouldn't do something that would deprive them of their father or mother. Fatima is pregnant. She's only 18. So let's intensify the pressure in the hope that she'll back away as well. What did Fatima do? Not only did she not back away, Fatima, as I said, one of the most painful things in the life of Fatima is the fact that she had to go door to door. Imagine Amir al-Mu'mineen in the company of his wife, the daughter of Rasulullah, knocking on doors unannounced. You know, if you're in your own home and someone comes to you unannounced, no appointment, nothing, what does that tell you? It tells you that there must be something important. They must really need your help. Obviously, in the case of Fatima al-Zahra, she didn't need anybody's help for her or her husband. She was like her son, Imam al-Hussein, who was there to save them, to give them a chance at redemption, so they wouldn't cause the kind of damage that she described herself in her sermon to the women of the Muhajirin and Ansar when she said, فَأَبْشِرُوا بِسَيْفٍ صَارِمٍ أَمَا وَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ لُقِحَتْ فَنَظِرَةً رَيْثَمَا تُنْتِجْ ثُمَّ احْتَلِبُوا مِلْعَ الْقَعْبِ دَمًا عَبِيطًا وَزُعَافًا مُبِيدًا. By God, this cow has been impregnated. By God, what you have done and what you have allowed to take place is something that will lead to generations of bloodshed. He said, you will have to watch how this cow won't produce milk but fresh blood. You will see how that blood will fill up buckets and overflow out of them. You will see how this poison will permeate through society for centuries. That's why Fatima is going door to door, but it means that it's her final desperate attempt to save this religion, to save the truth, to break that consensus that they claim existed. door to door, بأبيه وأمي. Fatima al-Zahra wouldn't go quiet. In the daytime, she would go to Baqi' and cry in agony and with bitterness. Then she would go to the grave of Hamza, Sayyid al-Shuhada, and she would cry and cry and cry. Her tears became her weapon and her voice. She'd cry in the daytime, she'd cry in the evening, to the point that they came to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Fatima is disturbing us with her tears. Get her to either cry in the daytime or the nighttime so that we could get some rest. Ultimately, people are motivated by their own self-interest. Leave me alone, I just want to rest. Leave me alone, I just want to have a comfortable life, a 9-to-5 job. Nice white picket fences around my home, a stable income. الناس عبيد الدنيا والدين لعق على ألسنتهم يحوطونه ما درت معائشهم, as Aba Abdullah al-Hussein famously says. وإذا محصوا بالبلاء قل الديانون. People are slaves of this dunya. Religion to them is like saliva in the mouth. You don't want too much of it. You want just enough to keep the inside of your mouth moist. And when it gets too much, you simply spit it out. That is religion to most people. We'll take as much of it as we need to satisfy our own spiritual needs, so that we could present ourselves as being religious and good and pious. But the second the push gets to the shove, the second it gets uncomfortable, the second it becomes awkward, the second we become the object of mockery, the second people find themselves between a rock and a hard place, that's when we spit it out. You won't see too many people who are religious. They said, let her either cry in the daytime or the nighttime, instead of offering condolences to Fatima, offering to help her. Someone says that I saw Fatima in Baqi' and she was crying bitterly and loudly, audibly. I went up to her. I said to her, Ya bint Rasulillah, what makes you cry like this? She said, they killed my father and they usurped the right of my husband. And I can see how they're playing with the values and principles and foundations of this religion. I can see how they're damaging it from the very inside. Fatima al-Zahra used everything while maintaining her chastity, her modesty, her decency. Because sometimes, and I know this is kind of a side point, but it's important. Sometimes people have the wrong impression, perhaps limited knowledge about Fatima al-Zahra. And so this woke mob that we've been kind of talking about over the last couple of nights, in order to compensate, I'm not saying everyone's like this, but sometimes in order to compensate for our own deficient religiosity in practice, what we do is we try to make up for it using other things that are trending, but also they don't cost a thing because it's trending, right? So everybody's doing it. So we might as well go with the flow. And so whether it be by standing for whatever subject that happens to be trending on Twitter or Facebook and posting stuff about it, or by using iconography, right? And by iconography, I mean, and again, I have nothing against this, but sometimes we make up for our lack of actual, substantial affiliation with Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Ahlul Bayt by wearing things and doing things and engaging in certain activities that would present us as being religious, that would project this image of religiosity. And in that way, it makes us feel better. We feel more pious to ourselves and perhaps in the presence of other people, and it kind of acts to compensate for that void and that vacuum that's inside of us. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, you're all very intelligent people, and you catch my drift, you understand what I'm talking about. The point here is this, that they did everything they could. Fatima alayhi salam fulfilled her obligation when she delivered the sermon of Fadak. The description of how Fatima left her home and entered the masjid and delivered that sermon is missing from our equation. It's missing. Many women, for example, put themselves in compromising positions, and they use the example of Fatima as some kind of guiding principle, as justification. Oh, Fatima to Zahra stood for justice and she delivered a sermon and she did that and that. How did Fatima to Zahra do all that? فخرجت من بيتها اشتملت بجلبابها لاثت خمارها. She wore multiple layers of hijab. Fatima to Zahra is the symbol of the veil. She is the epitome of modesty. Fatima to Zahra, one of her tragedies is the fact that she was so veiled and protected, and yet her home was ambushed. She wore multiple layers of hijab and even surrounded herself with her family members, with other women, so that she wouldn't be seen in public. Then she went into the masjid. Her dress was so long that it dragged along the road. Fatima didn't wear revealing clothes. Fatima to Zahra even asked Asma to build a new novel kind of casket so that her outline doesn't show. The outline of the body of Fatima to Zahra, who was passed from this world. She's no longer alive in the way that we know her anyway. And yet she says, I want you to build me something that doesn't show the outline of my body. The silhouette doesn't appear to people, even though she had said and instructed Amir al-Mu'mineen to be buried at night. You see how far Fatima goes in order to create that buffer, that protection, that veil. Then she goes into the masjid. How many times have you heard Fatima to Zahra gave speeches and lectures and delivered all these sermons? You know how she delivered her one singular sermon? When Islam was at stake, when God's religion was on the line, in the most exceptional circumstances, how did she do it? She went into the masjid, covered, veiled, protected, using 10 different means. She then went into the masjid. ثم جلست ونيطت دونها ملاءة. She didn't stand up, she sat down. And they put a curtain between her and the audience. ثم أنت أن أجهش لها القوم بالبكاء. If you're going to refer to the example of Fatima to Zahra, at least do some research. Do so properly. Follow, try. I'm not saying that we can all do this all at once, but at least try to follow in her footsteps. And don't be dishonest about it. Don't try and create your own alternative version of Fatima to Zahra. Follow the actual Fatima. I was saying on my way here to these two wonderful brothers who drove me, may Allah bless them and bless all of these luminous young faces that I see before me, people whose love for Fatima to Zahra has brought them here so that they could be inspired, so that they could cry for her tragedy, they could reconnect with her. I was saying that one of the problems that we have now is all of these high and unrealistic expectations between husbands and wives. The fact that if you actually try to do the right thing for once, if you tried to get married before you go to university, right? Which is the legal age of marriage. People are allowed to get married at the age of what? Is it 17 in this country or is it 18? Let's say 18. If somebody actually tried to do this and follow the teachings of Rasulullah, who said, إِذَا تَزَوَّجَ الشَّابُ فِي حَدَاثَةِ سِنِّهِ, if a young person gets married early on, meaning at the age of 17, 18, right? Not later than that. because it wouldn't be young and at the early stages of his youth. That if a person does this, عَجَّ شَيْطَانُهُ, the devil assigned to this individual, this young man, screams in agony and wishes he was dead. يَا وَيْلَهُ لَقَدْ أَحْصَنَ مِنِّي ثُلُثَيْ دِينِهِ. Oh my God, I wish I were dead. He or she has just immunized and safeguarded 2/3 of his religion. Then the Holy Prophet says, فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ الْعَبْدُ فِي الثُّلُثِ الْآخَرِ. You will end up with 1 more third. If you maintain piety in that, you're good to go. You're a youth that the Prophet can be proud of. Ash-shabul mu'minu taqiyya, some traditions tell us, a pious young man or woman is better than Jibreel. If we're going to follow the example of Fatima Zahra, this is how we have to be. But now, if someone at the age of 18 went along with his parents, first of all, good luck convincing your parents. Second of all, it actually works both ways. Because sometimes the parents don't mind. It's the youth who don't want it. So we're really stuck. We're cornered here. Shaitan has done a really good job. But let's say all that is overcome. If he goes and knocks on someone's door and says, I want to marry your daughter, how many people do you realistically, be honest, how many people will overlook the fact that this person is fresh out of high school, no university education, no stream of income, no house, no car, no nothing? How many people would say yes to that? Whereas you look at the life of Fatima Zahra. Let me share a hadith with you. I do ask you for your forgiveness, especially may Allah bless them, the scholars who are in attendance and blessing our gathering. A woman comes to our 6th Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam. A young woman, a very pious woman, extremely religious. She comes to the Imam and says to him, إِنِّي امْرَأَةٌ مُتَنَسِّكَةٌ, which means that I am a woman who likes to spend the bulk of her time in prayer, in acts of worship, in fasting. What's more beautiful than that? If someone could be like that. So she says to the Imam, and I will add one more feature, she must have been really intelligent, because she says to the Imam, I don't want to get married. Why would I get married? I want to spend my time in serving Allah and pleasing my Creator. If I get married, it's going to be all about cleaning the house and washing the dishes and changing the diapers and dealing with a naggy husband and doing all these things. Not that I have anything wrong with that. I'm simply prioritizing religion. MashaAllah. She deserves an award, right? What does the Imam say to her? The Imam says to her that if this was a good thing, meaning a woman who refrains from religion, even if it's to serve God, to worship Allah, if this was good, لَسَبَقَتْكِ إِلَيْهِ أُمُّنَا فَاطِمَةٌ. You know who the first person would be to do this? It would be my mother, Fatima Zahra. Meaning, marriage is the sunnah of Rasulullah, the sunnah of Fatima Zahra. It is something that must be fulfilled as soon as possible. And don't have a long checklist. Don't say that the person has to have a job and an education and this and that. Because you know what happens when you do that? It means you are trying to ensure the survival of the marriage using your own criteria, your own safeguards, instead of the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed. You're trying, as a father of the girl, for instance, I know that you're thinking to yourself, what can an 18-year-old boy do? Or 20 or 25 even. Forget 18. But you're thinking to yourself, he doesn't have a job. let alone a house, let alone a mortgage, let alone all these things. How is he going to look after my girl, my little sweetheart, my baby? But see, our religion teaches us that we follow the example of Muhammad and Al Muhammad salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in. Allahumma salli ala. They set our values, not society, not media, not demonic philosophies. The Ahlul Bayt set our values. That's why we follow them. That's why we subscribe to them. And so, believe it or not, they came to Fatima al-Zahra and they told her, how could you marry Ali ibn Abi Talib? He's the orphan of Abu Talib. His father isn't around. Maybe if his father was around, he'd have some prospects. Maybe one day he could succeed his father, be the chief of his tribe, inherit money or land or something or property. But he's only a team of Abu Talib. They mocked Amir al-Mu'mineen. Maybe they even mocked his appearance. They mocked Fatima al-Zahra because there were other contenders, other candidates who came forward and said to Rasulullah, we will fill this house with gold. I have the money. I have the looks. I have the chiseled chin. I have all these things that women would die for. Rasulullah said to him, you're incentivizing me with your money. If the Prophet touches the dirt, he can turn it into solid gold. And the Prophet did so in front of him. You're actually trying to convince me because you've got some camels and sheep and whatnot, or fast cars, or a good paying job, or whatever it might be. That's not the criteria we go by. It's not age, it's not a job, it's not money, it's none of these things. إِذَا جَاءَكُم مَّن تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ. Some have said خُلُقَهُ وَدِينَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. If the person checks these two boxes, not saying you shouldn't have any other criteria. Maybe you'd like someone who's from within your own community, your own family, your own ethnicity. Maybe you'd like someone who has a particular look, for instance. That's fine if you have multiple options. But those are not the criteria to reject someone. And the other hadith also famously says, إِذَا زَوَّجْتَ ابْنَتَكَ فَزَوِّجْهَا تَقِيٌّ. You want a good husband for your daughter? Find someone who's pious. That's it, piety. فَإِنَّهُ إِنْ أَحَبَّهَا أَكْرَمَهَا. For if he loves her, he will cherish her. He will honor her. وَإِنْ أَبْغَضَهَا لَمْ يَظْلِمْهَا. And if the road gets bumpy, if problems come up, if issues, which are sometimes inevitable, even then his piety will stop him from oppressing her, from hurting her. This is the example of Fatima al-Zahra. If we don't take from that example, if we're not inspired by it, if we don't try and follow it, then we have a deep-seated problem. I said to these young brothers, I said to them, they said, well, the reality is that it's a messed up jungle out there. And most people wouldn't go for this. Most people don't subscribe to these values. I said to them, well, let's imagine that that's true, even though I know for a fact that there are parents who are pious and who are looking for the right person. There are girls who are incredibly pious, who want someone who is religious and has good akhlaq, and that is all that matters to them. I know that that is true. But let's imagine that it is a messed up moral landscape. Even if that were the case, then be the disruptors of this messed up culture. In other words, make the commitment right now that when you're old enough and you have boys and you have girls, that you would abide by these principles and not the ones set by Bollywood or Hollywood. That you do the right thing. Because if you make this commitment here and now, I said swear in the honor of Fatima al-Zahra that you would do this. And if you do, number one, you will break this vicious cycle once and for all, because the next generation can then look forward to actual changes happening. Be the disruptors. Number one. Number two, when you make that commitment, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, عَلَى قَدَرِ النِّيَّةِ تَكُونُ مِنَ اللَّهِ الْعَطِيَّةِ. in proportion to your own intention, Allah will also give you the support, meaning that you will find the right wife and the right husband if you make that intention, not to make the life of that poor young man miserable because he doesn't have a job or he doesn't have a stable income. Now, I do apologize for taking your time. May Allah bless you. They said, we will do whatever it takes to silence Fatima, to the extent that when they carried out the first ambush, they were confronted with the voice of Rasulullah, represented by his daughter Fatima. So they backed away. Then there was a second ambush. Threats were made. Ibn Abi Shaybah speaks about this. They can try and obfuscate, they can try and deny, but the truth is out there for those who are looking. He came and said to Fatima, you know we love you and we know we love your father, but by God, that will not stop me from burning down the house over your heads. They left. The third time, the second brought a branch that he set on fire himself. One of his slaves said to him, Inna fil bayti la Fatima. Do you know that Fatima is inside the house? Fatima, the daughter of Rasulullah. This could backfire. This could be the end of you. Inna fil bayti la Fatima. Show some respect. Pretend like you have faith. Pretend like Rasulullah mattered to you. Al-mar'u yuhfadhu fi wulde. If you want to honor someone, as Fatima Zahra herself said in her sermon, didn't my father say that a person is honored by the honor that you offer to his children? You do know that Fatima is inside the house. He responded by saying, wa'in. I don't care. In fact, what he's saying, in fact, it is Fatima who is standing on our way. It is Fatima that I want to get. He goes to the door. I hope, I sincerely pray that his statement, his letter that he wrote to Muawiyah is nothing but a bunch of lies. He says that when I came to the door was already half burnt. I pushed it slightly only to feel that Fatima was leaning on it with all her body. Now remember, Fatima was only 18 years old. بِأَبِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ. Remember also that she was in her third trimester. She was pregnant. A pregnant woman, people make sure she doesn't feel any stress, that she doesn't get upset. She's in a very delicate position. He says that I felt her leaning against the door. So images began to roll in my head of the things that Ali had done to the idolaters, to the mushrikeen, to the kuffar, the ones that he had killed with Dhul Fiqar. These images began to roll in my head. So I farakaltul bab. I kicked the door in. She screamed in such a manner, he says, فَظَنَنْتُ أَنَّهَا رَجَّتِ الْمَدِينَةِ. I felt like it shook the entire city of Medina. What did Fatima Zahra say? She said, أَبَتَاهْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ أَهَكَذَا يُفْعَلُ بِحَبِيبَتِكَ. Oh my father, oh messenger of God, look at what they're doing to your sweetheart. He then says that I entered. The next thing that he did, أَجَرَكَ اللَّهِ يَا صَاحِبَ الْأَمْرِ وَالزَّمَانِ. I will mention an example, and I apologize to the Imam of our time. Have you seen these videos where people have a competition where one slaps the other person Have you seen how those slaps sometimes lead to the opponent falling unconscious? Now imagine this vile creature, this hateful animal, slapping the 18-year-old daughter of Rasulullah, such that the earrings of Fatima shatter and fall and disperse into the ground. She calls out the name of Allah. إليك فخذيني فقد والله أسقط ما في أحشائي. Because it's the last night, I also want to take you to the gravesite of Fatima, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. When everyone left, he then lowered the body of his beloved wife into the ground. Fatima al-Zahra was only a shadow at that point. He lowered her with his own hand. He then began to pour the soil over her. When he finished burying Fatima, the hadith says, Amir al-Mu'mineen then sat on the ground. فَهَاجَتْ بِهِ الْأَحْزَانِ. That's when the grief struck Amir al-Mu'mineen. That's when the sadness took the power from his legs. Amir al-Mu'mineen began weeping. He then turned to the direction of Rasulullah. Assalamu alayka ya Rasulallah. عني وعن ابنتك النازلة بجوارك. Oh Rasulullah, peace be upon you from me and on behalf of your daughter. Your trust, the one whose hands you put in my hands on our wedding night. You told me to look after her. You told me to cherish her. Ya Rasulullah, what can I say? But my wife has been taken from me. Then he says something to Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, قل عن صفيتك صبري ورق عن ابنة رسول الله تجلدي. Ya Rasulullah, I know I am Ali ibn Abi Talib, the strongest man who ever lived, the most patient man who ever lived. Imam Zainul Abidin says this in the court of Yazid. He says, أنا ابن أصبر الصابرين. My grandfather Amir al-Mu'mineen was the most patient one. And yet, Ya Rasulullah, my patience has run. My patience is no longer sufficient for this tragedy. Then he says to him, Ya Rasulullah, فأحفها السؤال واستخبرها الحال. O Messenger of God, when she returns to you, I want you to do something for me. Insist that she tells you what they did to her. Meaning that she never told me what happened between the wall and the door. Ya Rasulullah, maybe she will tell you and open up to you. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Before I read the dua, just a couple of words, my dear brothers and sisters. A man came to Imam al-Jawad and he asked him a question. Our ninth Imam. He said to him, O son of the Messenger of Allah, sometimes I perform Umrah, and in the process, I might perform Tawaf on behalf of you, the Ahlul Bayt. Is that something I can do? So the Imam said, absolutely, you can do that. So he went and came back many years later and he said to the Imam that I picked up this habit, if you like. Every time I'd go to Mecca, I would perform the circumambulation, the tawaf, on behalf of Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, all the way down to you, the ninth Imam. However, when it comes to Fatima al-Zahra, ربما طفت عنها وربما لم أطف. Sometimes I would do it on behalf of Fatima, sometimes I didn't. I might forget. What do you think? The Imam said to him, استكثر من هذا فإنه أفضل ما أنت عامله. Do more of that. Perform deeds on behalf of Fatima al-Zahra, for it is the best thing you can do. My brothers and sisters, this center, which I had not had the honor of visiting, many of you are probably here for the first time. This is a beacon for the community that lives in this area. The amount of work, blood, sweat, and tears that has gone into the construction, mashallah, of something that we can truly be proud of. However, 20% from what I hear, 20% of the work is yet to be completed, right? And I'm not going to sit here and ask you and beg you for donations, because I don't believe that Fatima al-Zahra or the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam need any of us. We are the ones who need them. We're the ones who stand to benefit and take advantage of our contributions in their name. What I'm asking you to do on behalf of the committee, the organizers, His Eminence, Sheikh Najm, may Allah bless him for his tireless efforts, is that you contribute something for the completion of construction work, the bathrooms and other areas which still require completion in the name of Fatima al-Zahra. And I recommend that if you're able to do this, take out £500 in the name of the 5 Panchtan Park, the Ahlul Kisa. £500, give it in the name of Fatima al-Zahra. Make this your gift to the masjid, to the Husayniyya Imam Barga, in the name of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. If you can't do that, if the amount is too high for you, you happen to be young, then contribute whatever you can. But it's important that we do that, because in doing so, we're able to anchor our boat to Fatima. This isn't about any specific individual. This is about making sure that these institutions are, in fact, recognized and supported, inshallah, so that we can all benefit from them. Inshallah, a special dua and Amman Yujib at the end for Sister Sana Shah for her speedy and healthy recovery as well, and all of those who require our du'as. Allahumma inna nas'aluka wa nad'uk بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها عجل اللهم فرج إمام زماننا يا الله. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والناس، اجعلنا من أصحابه وأعوانه ومقوية سلطانه. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. اللهم عافنا، اللهم اشف مرضانا، اللهم ارحم موتانا، اللهم وارحم علماءنا شهداءنا خدمة أبي عبد الله الحسين. إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات ومن مضى من هذا الجمع نقرأ لهم، نهدي لهم ثواب المجلس وثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله مالك يوم الدين، إياك نستعين ونستغفر صراط الذين أنعمت
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, to Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From voices Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in the luminous moon lighting the way, the luminous moon lighting the way, the rising sun that brightens my day. Heaven without you would be inflamed. You're the heaven in Karbala. Your visitors offer you the hand. Your visitors offer you the hand. Enemies will never understand. How can the water lose to the sand? How can the dirt win in Karbala? Oh, heaven is opening, Ya Hussein. Oh, angels descending, Ya Hussein. Oh, they are reciting Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, to Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. Together. From Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala. Karbala, the luminous moon lighting the way, the luminous moon lighting the way, the rising sun that brightens my day. Heaven without you would be inflamed. You're the heaven in Karbala. Your visitors offer you the hand. Your visitors offer you the hand. Enemies will never understand. How can the water lose to the sand? How can the dirt win in Karbala? Oh, heaven is opening, Ya Hussein. Oh, angels descending, Ya Hussein. Oh, they are reciting Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, to Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in The hand of God that nurtures the young, the hand of God that nurtures the young, speaking for Allah, you were the tongue, separating his right from the wrong, elevated in Karbala, the ship that sailed with me through the waves, and whoever boards your ship is saved, immune from the punishment from the grave. Whoever mourned you in Karbala, when will we meet again, Ya Hussein? When will we meet again, Ya Hussein? Under your dome will I breathe again. From Najaf will I walk to Karbala. From Karbala, to Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. One more time. From Karbala, to Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. Sallallahu Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.